The Vera Tommy Show. The Vera Tommy Show. The Vera Tommy Show. The Vera Tommy Show. Let's talk about it. 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 On the Vera Tommy Show. Let's talk about it. Yeah.
Does Joseph have a right to be angry? He does, right? We would look at the things that happened to him and we would say he has a right to be angry with his brothers, to be angry with the woman who accused him of rape and put him in jail. He has the right to be angry at the guy that forgot him and left him in prison. He has the right to be angry and bitter and want revenge. Do we see any place in his story in Scripture where he is demanding that God address his rights for justice, his rights for vengeance? We don't even see a place where Joseph says, in the midst of all of these things, he doesn't even say, God, why? Why would you let this happen to me? Look it up. It ain't there.
It ain't there. Look it up. It ain't there. So that was a clip from my guest's podcast. And I'm pulling her up. Hello, hello, hello. How are you, Lisa?
I'm so good. I'm so glad to be here.
I am so glad that you are here. And before you start talking, let me share a little bit about who Lisa Schafer is. And I'm having a little bit of difficulties because of my mouse not working. So things are a little anyway. Let me tell you about Lisa. Lisa Schafer married her husband Larry in 1985. 40 years. Congratulations.
Thank you.
She is not only an author, speaker, entrepreneur, and podcaster of Chronicles of the Christian Drama Queen. She is also a retired radio personality and a veteran homeschooling mom to three beautiful, now adult children. She is a super mima to four spectacular grandchildren and lives in a small central Kansas town. She now helps victims of abuse and abandonment find freedom through one to one breakthrough meetings and uses the Bible study she has written to facilitate freedom. And for more information on speaking engagements, personal mentoring through Christian Drama Queen Solutions LLC, coaching series, or to find her, we will have the links in the chat for you guys to connect with her. And we will also have them throughout this broadcast on the screen. So now, what I'm going to do is give you the floor and ask you to share more about Lisa Schafer, starting with what was your childhood like? And then we'll move forward.
Sure. Well, I'm so excited to be with you. When we first met, there was like this God connection, and it's like family. It's like spending time with family. I love it. And he's been doing so much of that for me. So much of that for me. I just developed some genuine, loving sisterhood relationships with people through reaching out to others who have similar ministries to mine. So I grew up the daughter of a single parent. My father pretty much disappeared on us when I was about 18 months old, and did not make any attempt throughout my life to have relationship with me, to see me. There were no birthday visits. There were no, picking me up on the weekend. There was none of that. We didn't have any of that. And he just wasn't there, just wasn't around. And I really didn't notice until I got into my probably early teens, that my mom was showing up to my events at school, but my father was not, and everybody else's father was. And it wasn't until then that I realized, you know what? Things are different for me. And they're it's changing. It makes me think differently about myself. I went through my teen years, my mom being the single parent. There was no, listen, back then, this would have been the 70s. We didn't have deadbeat dad laws where dads were forced to pay child support. We didn't have any of that. And mom did every time she could get a promotion, she had to take the promotion. And sometimes that meant that we moved. So we moved a lot before I was 9 or 10 years old. We lived in, Oklahoma and Texas and Kansas, which is where I eventually ended up staying, and is where I live right now. So, but growing up, things were tight. I remember, living poor enough that we had some cereal, but we didn't have any milk. And so there was water in the cereal bowl. My mom sometimes had to leave me at age 5 to walk my little brother down to daycare because she had to leave for work sooner than that. And so we just it was just a lot of single parents. I know, we weren't the only family like that, but at that time it was pretty rare. And so we just, lived paycheck to paycheck. I had great godly grandparents that took care of us when we had great need or when we had illness, but they weren't always there. We had to live other places, so they weren't always there. And it wasn't until I got a little bit older that I realized my life has been impacted by my abandonment. In the midst of that, when I was about 4 years old, I also suffered some sexual abuse from a babysitter's teenage son. And that impacted me as well, because of course, if you've talked to anyone who's been a victim of abuse, they have a tendency to grow up thinking that with a victim's mentality, I'm not worth anything. I feel dirty or shameful or whatever. And I carried that with me into my teen years, where I lived like a real prodigal in my teen years. And kind of got my heart broken several times trying to look for love in all the wrong places, which I
Yes.
really attribute to my father's not being around. So,
Yes, and it's funny that you should say that because I run across women. I used to drive Uber and Lyft when I was in Kentucky and in Georgia. And I would pick up young women at 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning going to be with a man. And I would always ask them, what type of relationship did you have with your father? And in most cases, either they didn't have one or they had a poor one. And so, again, having a father in the house, especially for a female, is so important. And as you recognize and begin to realize how that loss or not having him in your life, when you realize that, how did it make you feel? And what were some of the ramifications as a result
mhm,
of him not being in your life?
mhm. It's funny. I didn't realize it was making much of an impact in me until I began to have a genuine relationship with the Lord. And when I started to communicate with him about why he would allow me to live through the things I had lived through, it was during a Father's Day sermon that the pastor said and introduced that one verse, that God is the father to the fatherless, that I realized that I had never really been alone, but I had felt alone. And that's kind
Mhm.
of, I started this discovery process in a genuine walk with Christ, and understanding where he was, how he really felt about me. Because before that, not having a father around, and I've even talked to some men, especially in my podcasting, I've talked to some men who have really struggled with that as well. Our value is greatly wrapped up in how our parents relate to us. And it starts out very young. Well, if he's not relating to you at all, then you're obviously going to have those feelings of being unloved and unwanted and uncherished and unprotected. And in many, many cases, because there's not a father around, that's when other trauma happens. For
Yes.
us, it was not just poverty, but I believe that if my father had been around, maybe I would not have experienced the abuse I did when I was in single digits. And maybe I would not have had those compounding thoughts of unworthiness and worthlessness. I would say unworthiness more than worthlessness that kind of followed me into my teen years, and that looking for love and all. It was like there was this daddy shaped hole in my heart, and I kept looking for a man to fill it.
Mhm.
And it wasn't until I was much older that I realized God could fill that space. But a lot of damage was done between the time I started looking for love in all the wrong places and the time I realized that God wanted to fill that space.
And
Um,
how old were you when you realized that?
I was probably almost 30 when I heard the pastor say that verse, and it altered my thinking immediately. So one of the things that I address in my Bible studies is that the thoughts I have about my earthly father really impacted the things I was thinking about my heavenly father.
Mhm.
I didn't understand, and of course then my victimization when I was at a very young age kind of just reinforced what I was thinking about God not wanting me, right? So if he had wanted me or loved me, then he wouldn't have allowed what happened to me to happen. And so, because of that faulty thinking, my fatherlessness led me to believe that the Holy Father, my Father in heaven, was very
Mhm.
similar, must be the same way. And I had one positive relationship with a man all of my life until I got married, and that was my grandfather, whom we didn't really live with.
Mhm.
But I did see him the most of all the men in my life. But all the other men in my life, because just whether it was the babysitter that took advantage of me as a 4-year-old, or somebody else that was in my life as a friend of my mom's or a friend of the family, there were very, very few good men in my life. And so I thought that was kind of my position was going to be abused, unwanted, unloved, and uncherished by men. And I just carried that with me into those teen years. And like I said, I was almost 30 when I heard that verse where the pastor said, and it just broke my heart. I realized God's probably been wanting me to lean on him for a long time. And I hadn't done it because I hadn't known that I could do that. And that began my closer walk with him.
That's amazing. And then you went from, so let me ask you, emotionally, how were you feeling? Because I know we're talking about breaking the bondage of bitterness.
Mhm.
So how, yeah, tell me more
It
about that.
it it took me a long time to realize that's what I was feeling, because, bitterness is not the first thing you think of when you're angry and when you have this rage or when you have these self-deprecating thoughts. It's not the first thing that you think of. It wasn't until I realized God wanted me to forgive both my father and my abuser, that I realized he wanted to equip me to do that. That's when I realized the opposite of that is bitterness, and
Yeah.
that the fueling of my rage and anger and self-doubt and all of those worthless things, that was all coming from an inability to forgive not just my father and not just my abuser, but also I really struggled to forgive God. And I'll be honest with you, God doesn't need my forgiveness. He's the God of the universe. He doesn't need my forgiveness, but he doesn't. I need to understand who he is and walk in a close enough relationship with him that I can gain the mind of Christ. I
Yeah.
can know how much he really loves me and how much he really loves others. And until you spend some time getting there, because by the time you get there and you're broken, you've got all this guilt and shame for walking
Yeah.
around and getting yourself in trouble and being, I remember one time sitting down and making a list of all of the relationships I'd had up till I was about 26. And obviously I got married when I was 21. So between the ages of 15 and 21, it was a legal pad full of names.
Oh my.
And the kind of damage that was done to me, physically and emotionally and spiritually because of that, just being angry and thinking I didn't deserve any better, the guilt from that and the shame from that, obviously led me to a brokenness I needed the Lord to heal. But dealing with that and understand, it was kind of a, I remember the day that I decided I was going to lay all of that before the Lord, and I'd been instructed by a counselor to write those things down. It was overwhelming. It was like a mountain. And that was when I understood the kind of sacrifice Christ carried for me and took on for me was massive, because the shame that came from even putting those names down on paper was legitimate.
Wow.
It was legitimate. And it was a way for him to draw me closer to him, because I was just so broken and hurt that I would allow myself to be that person. And he was just so loving and generous to remind me that he knew it all before I wrote it down,
Yes.
and he was able to forgive it all before I wrote it down.
Yes.
And he carried it all before I wrote it down.
Yes. Yes.
So he was very, very good to me in that. But the emotional, the most emotional stuff came when I started to have kids, and I realized I had this uncontrollable rage, and I couldn't figure out. And I never, I didn't throw them up against the wall or any of that kind of stuff, but I did have this uncontrollable self doubt that God, I went through infertility for years, and I just kind of decided maybe the Lord didn't want me to be a parent because I didn't have anything to offer, or I just didn't deserve to be one.
Mm.
That's the stuff in the head. You start thinking those thoughts. And when I did have them, I still doubted that he had made the right decision. Like, surely you didn't allow these children to live with me because you thought I could do it, because I'm not very good at it.
So
And
let me ask you this. What were, because you went into parenting with unresolved issues that you had not yet been able to address, maybe not even identify at that point in time.
sure.
So what types of, how would you describe how your anger or your rage transferred into parenting?
Well, I just remember being feeling so ill-equipped that uh, I brought our first baby home. I brought him home. He was 5 pounds, um, crazy dark black curly hair and stunning. And I brought him home, and all I could think of was I need him to love me back. What do I do to make sure he loves me back? And I talk about that in my studies, how I really created this enabling parenting mentality where I felt like I had to perform to make sure I didn't lose them. Didn't want to lose my children. It was a bad deal. It's not a good parenting skill. Trust me. But from the very beginning of my relationship with my children, I thought, I just don't want to do anything to mess this up. It was like, it was such a lack of trust in what God could do if I would
Mm.
let him.
Mhm.
And basically what I did was I promised myself I'd never abandon them, I'd never let them down, I'd never disappoint them, because I had this belief that, I just wasn't gonna be like my dad.
Right.
And, man, when you start to apply that kind of pressure on on yourself as a parent,
Yes.
you can just about guarantee bad things are gonna happen. Bad things are gonna happen. And, now they're adults. They're 30, and they're 33 and 30 and 26, and, we talk about it because, when I started to write the Bible studies, I had to let them know that these things were happening in my life at that time, and I wanted them to know how God had retrained my brain, but that I probably let them down, trying to allowing myself to just never wanna lose their love, and
Yeah.
panicking if I thought it was gonna happen. And when you have teenagers, you can't think that
Oh,
way.
no,
You
you
cannot
can't.
think that way.
No,
Uh,
you can't.
and so but it was a big, not wanting to be a failing parent basically made me a failing parent, if
Well,
that makes sense. But, I don't have it. Listen, I've gotten over it. I realize it. I've seen it. We've talked. Everybody in the family's talked about it.
yeah. Well, let me ask you
But
this. Did you ask your children to forgive you, or did you
yes.
also
Nope.
apologize to them?
Yeah, I've gone to all of them and said, I know I was not perfect, and the reason was because of this, but it doesn't change the way I probably made you feel and the way I probably didn't protect you enough because I was so worried about losing your love.
Mm,
And, that was a bad deal. That was a bad idea. I didn't let the Lord lead or guide me at all, and I would tell you right now, I thought I was. I was reading books, and we were taking them to church, and I've got a I mean, I have a whole whole 'nother book in my head about the things that they went through, because, there's a whole lot my first Bible study was about dealing with abandonment, and there's a level of that with every adopted child. They deal with that,
yeah.
and, I didn't realize what I was going through, they would someday probably have to go through as well.
Yes.
So yes, we did. I've had to have some broken times with them and say, "Man, I shoulda I shoulda done different." I set you guys up, and,
Wow.
so yes, we have definitely talked about it, sure.
You are watching the Vera Thomas Show. And so please like, subscribe, and share this podcast, particularly if you know of people that are hurting, that are bitter, that are angry, then have them come watch the show because all of those things, guilt, rage, bitterness, guilt, shame, anger, all of that stems from unforgiveness. Would you not
Mhm.
say that?
It absolutely does. And because and that's probably not the only reason. I mean, obviously, the other people get mad for other reasons, but I
Right.
will I will tell you that for me, it was 40 years of just trying to figure out the character of God and understand that forgiveness was for me. He was giving it to me as a
Yes.
gift. Wasn't for my abuser, it wasn't for my dad. Years after, um, I was probably in my mid-20s when I realized that I'd sat down with that verse, God was the father to the fatherless, and I realized I'm gonna reach out to my dad. I'm gonna find him, and I'm gonna see if we can develop something.
And
I needed some
did you?
answers. Oh, no, it was bad. It was bad, girl. It was bad. It was really bad.
But
It was
you did
I
go
tried.
try to
I
find
did.
him?
I did. I tried to reach out to him, and I did spend some time with him. Now looking back, and this story is included in my first Bible study, that looking back, I think he just had some mental illness. He just was not
Okay.
capable of having a genuine relationship with any of his children. I was the oldest as far as I know, but he was a country singer, and he had a lot of groupies, and he made a lot of babies with those groupies, and
Oh,
so my
wow.
my understanding, without knowing for fact, but I do know 3 of my siblings, and, one of them has told me there are 9 of us.
Oh my goodness.
So there are 9 abandoned children from this
Oh
one
my
man
goodness.
from this
Have
one man.
you tried to find your other siblings?
I need to do one of those DNA things, I think, and see if I can locate them. So, it's one of those things that my half sister, half brother, and I have discussed. But it's a little bit scary to do that.
Yeah.
'Cause you don't know who you're going to be related to. Can be a little bit, but
Yeah.
yeah, but no, I did reach out to him. I did try to build something. He was a compulsive liar. He just couldn't not. He couldn't stop lying, and every attempt that I made broke my heart, and I finally just had to
Wow.
let him go, and told him so, and said,
Yeah.
You know what? You can't try and build a relationship with me if you can't stop lying." And even then, he couldn't say, "Well, I'll stop lying." He had no idea he was lying. So that was I can't remember how we got onto this, but I will tell you that I had to let go of him being my father, period, because that was
Mhm.
never going to happen, and God just kept telling me, "That's okay, I'm your daddy.
Wow.
I've always been your daddy. You didn't know it. You didn't crawl up on my lap. You didn't find comfort from me when you could have, but here I am now, and I've always
Yeah.
been there, and I'm not moving, and we're gonna make what we've got work."
That's
And,
beautiful. And
and he did.
that my story is very similar because I did grow up with a stepfather,
Mhm,
um, but I felt different. I felt like the black sheep
mhm,
and felt treated like the black sheep
mhm,
oftentimes. And I went to look for my dad. My mom, she only told me 3 things. He was, well, 4. He was an electrician, He was intelligent, he served in the military, and he was an alcoholic. So she left him when I was an infant. I was 10 years old when she told me that my stepfather was not my dad, which was very devastating.
Oh, shocking. Yeah.
Because I wonder, it's like, why am I treated differently? And so she finally told me.
Because you
And
had
then
siblings, right?
I have, yes,
That were
yes,
his.
I have had two sisters. They're both deceased now,
Hmm.
and a brother who is still, he lives in Florida. And I went to look for my dad when I graduated from high school. My mother made provision for me to go to her family, which I didn't really know, but I went to meet my family on my mother's side, and they promised me that they would take me to the town where my dad was from. But before they did, they introduced me to one of their friends. We went to a movie, and he attacked me in his car after the movie, and I left and didn't find my dad.
Hmm.
5 years later, my mother died, and I went back to look for him. But this time, my best friend and I went directly to the town that he was from, met my uncle for the first time, met my grandmother for the first time, and she kept rubbing my hand and saying, "You're John C's daughter. You're John C's daughter." And found out that my dad died the year I was looking for him.
Mm.
So I never knew him.
Hmm.
And like you, I oftentimes felt alone, especially after my mother died.
And did you kind of romanticize the idea of having your real dad?
Yes,
Right.
I did.
I remember having memories of. Okay, now we're going to cry. So I remember having almost like daydreams. I'd be on stage because I was a performing artist. I was, in musicals and stuff like that when I was a teenager. And he'd come up to me at the end of the show and say, "I'm your dad and I've missed you. And I wish I could have been around." I mean, I kind of romanticized all this. So
Yeah.
when I finally met him, so one time when I was 9, one time, my mother, my grandparents on his side asked if they could see me, and they took us to dinner. And then the next thing I know, he's there with his new family, showing up there at their home with his new family. And I just watched him. It was very weird. It was a very surreal feeling. And I went home and I just broke down in tears after that. And my mother came to me and said, "What's wrong?" First of all, she was shocked. We had no warning whatsoever he was going to be there.
Mhm.
Um, and and I just remember saying to her, "I just didn't like him. I just didn't like him." And there was something about his
Spirit.
overly charismatic, musician-y, self-absorbed, narcissistic he just exuded that. It just, like, wept out of his pores, and I just didn't like him, and I remember being really disappointed that
Mhm.
I had finally met him, even at 9, and I didn't like him. And it broke my heart. And that's why I think when I got older, I kind of romanticized the idea of him showing up sometime, saying he missed me and wanted to be with me and wanted to build a relationship with me and apologizing for not being around, and kind of romanticized all of that. And um, I was sorely disappointed when I finally did connect with him in my 20s, trying to build a relationship out of something that wasn't there. He just
Wow.
couldn't do it. He just couldn't do it. Um, and he, it for those 2 or 3 years that I was trying over and over, really the only time that I got contact from him was through my half brother, who had said, "He's really sick. You might want to come and see him in the hospital because we think this might be it." And then it wouldn't be. But I was there the day he died. I was
Oh,
there.
were you?
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, when, his health was very, very poor. Of course, you can imagine living like a country singer and not having
Mhm.
any boundaries as far as drugs and alcohol and that sort of thing.
Right.
But as he got older, I was the oldest girl, you know, and, the aunts and my half brother got a hold of me and said, "This is probably it." My mom even tried to invest time and energy into our relationship. She sat there and listened to him tell all kinds of spin all kinds of yarns about their
Oh.
life before.
Even
And
on his sick bed?
oh yeah, 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 yeah. Oh yeah, his stories were his stories were phenomenal. And here was the thing. And so here's the thing about forgiveness. And I'll go back to this topic because
Yes.
you can think you've walked through that process and that you're gonna forgive, and that turn the other cheek time comes and they hurt you again. And that was something I was never expecting to have happen because I thought I was kind of over it. When I finally walked through that process of forgiving, I thought I was kind of over it until the day he knew he was dying. And my mother and I are both sitting there. And he says, "You know, it's been a crazy life, but I wouldn't change a thing." And
Oh my God.
I looked at my mother and she looked at me and I said, "Really? You wouldn't change a thing?" "Nope." I
Oh
couldn't
my
believe it.
goodness.
I couldn't believe it of all the things for him to say. And then there I was bitter and angry all over again.
Yes.
And
Oh my.
and then and the way that that came to a head for me was I had pretty much decided that was it. You know,
Mhm.
I had several opportunities to decide that's it. I'm not seeing him anymore. We're not doing this anymore. I'm not trying anymore. And one particular time, it's Easter Sunday, and everybody went to the church for breakfast but me. And I'm in my house, and I'm trying to get ready to go because I was the last one. I had 3 kids by then. We're all running to, and our house is 2 or 3 blocks away from the church. So I run to that house. I drop everybody off for Easter breakfast, and I go in, and I'm listening to a pastor in from a church in Wichita. His name's Mark Hoover. Made a huge impact on me. He was a radio pastor, and now he is the pastor of a big church there called New Spring. But back
Mhm.
then, he was doing programs on the little radio station I worked for. So I was always listening to the station. And he was doing a lesson on forgiveness. And he said something to me that was so profound. And it has stuck with me forever.
What was that?
He said, when you don't forgive because you think you don't have to, somebody that's hurt you, when you don't forgive the person that's hurt you, it's like you've handed them your heart. The
Yes.
very thing you would never do.
Yes, because
Eh,
they're getting on with their lives,
he didn't
and
care.
here we are harboring all this hurt and
Hurt, right?
anger and
He
guilt.
he had absolutely no idea. He didn't care how much he hurt people, and I was not the only one. Like I said, I've got 8 other siblings somewhere, right?
Wow.
And I know that they were hurt and traumatized, and some of them had dads in their life that came into their life and carried that load. I know one of my siblings had a really good fatherly role model in his life,
That's
and that's
awesome.
who he calls dad. He does not call our father dad. And so, but but when he said that to me, the bitterness would, I mean, it was like 2 steps forward and 6 steps back. You know, you're like,
Yes,
I'm gonna forgive you. Wait, 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 wait. Don't say something like that because now I don't know what to do with this hurt, right? And
yes.
when Mark Hoover said, you'd hand your heart over to the very person that you would never hand your heart over to when you stay bitter. And it
Yes,
was like so freeing.
yes. And my experience with understanding forgiveness, I had not spoken to a family member for a whole year because of the way I felt I had been treated. And my son wanted a birthday party, and he was like, I want this person here. And at the same time, our church was going through a forgiveness training. And the training was
I'm sure
by
that was coincidental.
right, exactly, at the same time. And it was called The Bait of Satan. I
Mm,
don't know if you're familiar with that. I think the
mm.
author is Belvedere,
I'll
if
have to
I'm not
find it.
mistaken. But it's a whole training on forgiveness. And one of the things that was emphasized in that training is when you are not able to forgive, that bait of Satan is when we are offended or when we offend. That is the bait of Satan because that's when unforgiveness begins to creep in.
Right.
And so I went through that process. I approached the person, and my question was, "What did I do to you?" And of course, they didn't respond. And I said, "I don't know what I did to you, but whatever I did, I ask your forgiveness. And I want you to know that I forgive you. I don't ever want to go through this again, but,
No.
I forgive you." And I'm so glad that I was able to do that because shortly after that, they got sick and I had to be there for them.
Hmm. That's
And and I don't regret. And, that's the other thing about forgiveness. When you are able to forgive, that guilt, that anger, that shame, that regret,
mm-hmm.
it all dissipates because
Mm-hmm.
you have forgiven. And I need to do a commercial, and it's actually a video on forgiveness by one
Mm.
of my sponsors. So I'm
Forgiveness
going
is
to
a
play this.
powerful tool for personal growth.
Oh, what happened? Okay.
Trust it.
Forgiveness is a powerful tool for personal growth, allowing us to let go of resentment and move forward. The key to inner peace and emotional well-being. Apologies and forgiveness go hand in hand, creating space for healing and reconciliation. Inner work and willingness are essential in the process of forgiveness, requiring us to confront our own emotions and vulnerabilities. Taking a broader perspective on actions helps us understand the complexities of human nature and the impact of forgiveness on relationships. The journey of self-discovery is intertwined with forgiveness, leading us to a deeper understanding of ourselves and others. Follow Divine Marketing Pro for more personal growth.
Divine Marketing by Ariel Chime. And let me tell you, if you want videos and promotional items that are going to be authentically you, then you want to check out Ariel Chime at Authentic Divine Marketing at https://bit.ly/divine chime. She did that video for me because forgiveness is something that we talk about a lot. And
Mm-hmm.
it's just very important that people understand if we are not able to forgive ourselves and also forgive other people, then we are shortchanging the plans that God has for us.
Yeah, you cannot, and I love that little video. You cannot be who God intends you to be in bondage to your bitterness.
Oh, I
You,
love it. Say that
you,
again. Say it
you,
again.
you cannot be the person God intends for you to be if you hold on to that bondage of bitterness. It
Yes.
it decides your self-worth. It decides your
Yes.
value. It decides how
Yes.
much you're going to love others. It limits your abilities to reach out to those who are hurting, because a lot of times it's people that have hurt you. Like you
Yes.
had said, you were able to have this forgiveness moment with someone, and then they needed you. And
Yes.
if I had not forgiven my father, I would not have been there when he
No, you
passed.
would not
And
have
and
been.
it would not, and believe me, it wasn't pretty. It was a very ugly story. But but I wouldn't have been able to kind of, yeah, I wouldn't have been able to do it if God had not equipped me with an
Mhm.
ability to see him the way that God sees him, with some
Yes.
pity, and with some genuine love that I couldn't have mustered up all by myself. I couldn't have done
Yes.
it. Couldn't have done it.
Yes. And I've put on the screen how you can reach Lisa at ChristianDramaQueen.com. And her podcast is https://www.buzzsprout.com 218-1999. And I
The
will put
easiest
that in.
Yeah, the
Yes.
easiest way is go to your platforms, whatever podcasting platform, if it's iTunes or Spotify, and just type in Chronicles of the Christian Drama Queen and it'll pull up. Yeah.
Okay, now tell me about this Christian drama queen. Why do you call yourself a
Okay.
drama queen? And I'm going to
So
give you the floor again.
so what happened a few years ago was I was working in healthcare, and of course I'm 60 years old.
Oh,
It's
you're
not.
just a baby.
I'm just a baby. I'm just a baby. Says Miss Vera. Oh, you're just a baby.
Yes.
Uh, I really felt like the Lord was calling me to come home and start telling my story. Now, in all honesty, I didn't have a clue what story we were talking about. I took a little short 6-week writing course so I could kind of refresh some things I had learned from high school and college about writing a story. Um, I I I sat down in front of a blank screen and went, "Okay, Lord, where do we start?" And it was I had all these things. I homeschooled kids for 25 years. I could have written a book about that. I had infertility issues that I had dealt with, and there was a lot of trauma involved with that, even from the church, without knowing it. Right? They certainly didn't intend to be hurtful. I could have talked about our adoption journeys and all three of my kids. That book is in the works just because I want to be able to document their stories. But there were all these things I could have talked about, and when I sat alone in front of that screen, it wasn't until I was in the middle of praying with someone else that she had said, "You know, the place God probably would use you best is the place where He's redeemed you most." And it was like a
Wow.
waterfall. It was like everyone needs to know that they can forgive the atrocities that you have forgiven.
Yes.
And it was and that was it, man. The writing process started. So I wrote the first Bible study. It was called Discarded: A Daughter's Journey to Reclaim
Yes.
Freedom.
Let me pull that up.
Yes, and Forgive the Father Who Left Her Behind, which is a very long title, but I couldn't help it. And and so I sat and wrote that, and it is available on Amazon. I just tell people if they'll shoot me an email at that Lisa@ChristianDramaQueen.com, I'll spiral bind those for them if they want to buy them direct from me because Amazon won't do that. But after so I wrote it, and then the idea was, okay, so how do you market a Bible study without a marketing team or without a big budget? I don't know. And several of the people I'd sent it to, pastors I had sent the book to, and said, I just need to want to make sure I'm on the right track here. I don't want to be preaching heresy or anything like that. And two of the pastors that had responded to me both had said, yes, right on track. We wish we'd had this resource when we had women come in that needed counseling about these sorts of things. And so I was thrilled that they were giving me that endorsement, but they both said the same thing. Your writing is good, and obviously the scripture's all good, but the Spirit of God gifts you when you speak.
Yes. Oh my goodness. And discarded a daughter's journey to I can't
Reclaim freedom. Yeah, it's
reclaim
really
freedom.
poor font. Yeah.
Okay, so let me ask you. So can you identify some of the scriptures that are in this book for healing?
Well, sure. Don't ask me a hard question, Miss Vera. So one of the things that I address, of course, what the way the Bible study is written is that it's from the perspective of all the false things that we believe, that we're unloved and we're unwanted, unworthy, uncherished, undesirable. And we get to a place in there where we are addressing the fact that we ourselves are ungrateful and unforgiving. So
Mm,
it's like 12 weeks of that. And then at the back, there's a study, the whole Old Testament story of the life of Joseph, where so
mm,
much happened. And then
yes.
God, but the verse that I feel like the Lord has really impressed upon me, and the reason why I keep talking about this, I'm not making a lot of money from the sale of Bible studies. I'm not. But the verse in Second Corinthians chapter 1 verses 3 through 5 talks about God being the God of all mercy and comfort,
Yes.
and that in our distress, the whole point is so that we can reach out and comfort others, because we're going to be able to say to them, in my worst, most distressful times, the God of all mercy and comfort came, and He wants you to have that comfort too.
Yes. And you know what? We are living in such a time where people are feeling all these things. And we have to understand the God of mercy.
Mm.
we have to also understand that he said, "Come, my yoke is easy and my burdens are light." We are carrying a lot of unnecessary weight right now.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't have any control over what's going on with our government. We don't have any control, but God does.
Mm-hmm.
And he said the government is on his shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we can trust our faith, search the scriptures, seek the scriptures. He said, if you seek me, you will find me. If
Mm-hmm.
you seek me with your whole heart. And forgiveness is a part of that. Reconciliation is a part of that. Humbling ourselves before him is a part of that. And recognizing that he made us fearfully and wonderfully.
One of the things that I try to, because most of the women that come to me to walk through the process, they just have no peace. There's constant fear. There's constant self-doubt. There's constant disbelief that God really loves them. There's this disbelief that because if he loved me, he wouldn't allow these things to happen. They just have all these lies that they've built up in their life, in their
Mhm,
head and all that.
mhm.
But that lack of peace, listen, men, okay, don't take me wrong. I know God created man in his own image and he loves us all, but we suck. We're not nice sometimes. We don't.
That's
We're not good. We're not. There's no goodness in us without the Lord. There's not,
I agree.
right? So if you get to a place where you understand that even though we stink, humans do not, we don't do good things. The heart of man is desperately wicked and capable of all kinds of
Yes.
evil.
Yes.
If you get to that place where you understand that God's redemption of man, that's why it's so incredible. That's why it's so big, is that he looks at how ugly we are and then superimposes that glorified Christ, that covered all of our sin. We bear the righteousness of Christ in
Yes.
front of a holy God
Yes.
when we choose to take it on.
When we choose.
And that means choosing the peace.
Yeah.
That means I need to seek it. And the
Yes.
closer I walk with the Lord, the more intimate I am with him, the more I address and allow him to convict me of sin in my life and let him take it and take the pain that I've suffered because of other men's sin toward me, the more peace we have. And that means all this other stuff that's going on, whether it's government things or financial problems or bad attitudes at the grocery store, or people that self-medicate and then they superimpose their hardships in your life because they're your loved ones or whatever. All of that, you can have peace through all of that.
Yes.
And I don't say that lightly, and I'm not telling you that I'm doing it every day the way I'm supposed to, because it still hurts. There's still things
Yes.
that hurt. And
Yes.
and I give all of my clients permission to still hurt, but to understand the closer you get to knowing the mind of Christ and the character qualities of the holy God of the universe, the more peace you will have. The
Yes.
more
And
peace you will have.
yes, I really want to stay on that topic for a minute
Okay.
because there is nothing like the peace
Mm.
that surpasses understanding. So, how do we get that peace? First of all, scripture says he will keep you in perfect peace whose mind is stayed on him
Hmm.
first. Second of all, peace be still. You can begin to claim that in the midst of drama,
Hmm.
trauma, and confusion. I know personally those three words can move mountains. Peace.
Amen.
Be still. It will keep you calm in the midst of whatever it is you're going through. Peace. Be still. If the winds and the waves obeyed his will, then we too can have that kind of peace by obeying his will.
And don't you think that has a great deal to do with the fact that we need to be in fellowship with him all the time?
Yeah.
See, I have lived when I was a young believer, I remember spending a great deal of time setting aside devotional time. So you set aside your hour and you spend your time in the word and you pray, and then you're up and you're off and you're on for the day. And then I wouldn't have another conversation with him until I was angry at something or mad about something. I wouldn't be fellowshipping with him all day long, right? I would wait until I got alone with him again to lay it all at his feet. During this time when I was in my 30s, really, because it took several decades for me to work through this process.
It
When
takes
I
time.
oh well, and you have to be intentionally seeking the answers to these feelings of being unwanted and unloved and all of that. You have to be seeking what he says about those things. You got to renew your mind with the washing of the water of the word. And so I got to I got to a place, and I'm there now, where I'm talking to him all day. It's a good thing he does not get tired. Because,
Amen. I can
because
so relate to that. Oh
because
my
I'm like
God.
all day. It's like all day. Okay, Lord, this ain't working out. What am I doing?
Yes.
I got another
Yes.
flat tire. I got to find money for this. I got to do that. I know. And I'm having these conversations with him. And there are times when my husband has caught me having a conversation. Are you talking to me? No. So,
And the
my
interesting,
granddaughter's the worst. My granddaughter's the one that says, "Who are you talking to?" I was like, "I'm talking to the Lord."
but see, the beautiful thing is you can talk to him like that.
Yes.
You can
And that's
talk
what he
to.
wants. We think he gets inundated, and so he's not listening. Listen, babe, he's got it. He's here. He
Yeah.
already
And
knows. Listen, one of the things that I'm listening to me, I'm getting all pointy. One of the things that I've mentioned in the study is that God knows the mind of each and every one of us. He knows the thoughts that we have.
yes.
We're not hiding anything from him by
Now,
not fellowshipping with him.
yes. And
So we can think we're running from things and we're avoiding things. We're self-medicating some pain. We're doing the alcohol or the drugs or whatever. For me, it used to be smoking, and now it tends to be Oreos, which is another book. We'll go there later. But you're not hiding anything. We're
no,
not. You're
we're
completely
not.
exposed.
Eh,
We're completely
We
exposed.
are. And an example. This is how powerful God is.
Mm.
This today when I got ready to leave work, it was pouring down raining. And I have another friend that rides with me, and she was like, "Okay, Vera, let's pray." And I said, "Well, wait, let's just get out there." But I stopped. We prayed, and the prayer was, "Please lighten this rain so that we can get to the car." And guess what? By the time that prayer was over, the rain had lifted. Another instance, before I got my car, I was taking Proline, which is a special bus that will pick me up
Mhm.
at my door. But anyway, it was pouring down raining. By the time I was to get to my apartment, it was pouring down. And I sat on the bus. And because the driver is like, "Well, I'll let you use my umbrella." I said, "Well, you're going to need your umbrella if you get
Yeah, you
someone that
can't
is
stay
in
in
a
the bus
wheelchair,
forever.
right? You're going to need your umbrella." I said, "I'm going to pray," and so I prayed for the rain to stop. By the time I get to my house, and do you know? By the time I got to my house, the rain had
Mhm.
stopped. And
Mhm.
another passenger, she was like, "What kind of connection do you have?" I was like, "You can have the same." You know,
Everybody can hook up, man. It's not that
right,
hard.
right. It's not that hard. And then I saw her again, and she said, "Vera, do you know that after the rain stopped for you, by the
It's
time I got home, it was pouring down again?" I said, "Hey,
You gotta know the
I
man.
believe you got to know him, and
You
you
gotta
got
know
to
the man.
trust when you call on him.
Yep,
You
yep,
use his words back to him. His
yep,
word does not return to him void,
right,
and
right.
he's not a God that he would lie. So whatever you're asking for, based on his word, I'm telling you,
Mhm. It is
I'm
a com
telling you,
it and I will tell you that my belief in my trust in him has increased, because of the harder conversations, because of the, "Okay, when this was going down and I was 4, people will say, you can't ask God why, you can't do this, you can't. I had to know why. I needed to know why those things would happen. Why would you let that little 4-year-old girl go through those 15 minutes?
Yeah.
Why? And he was so good to me to give me an answer to that. But it wasn't until I was willing to see something really hard. And I had to say to him, no matter the reason, I will still love you. I will still love you, even if I don't like the answer to the question. And he gave it. And it's really very simple. He can't be a different God of patience and being slow to strike
Anger.
him dead.
Yes.
He can't be a different God to my perpetrator than he is to me.
Wow.
And so when he knows them, we talked about this, he knows the thoughts of every man. He knew that kid was coming down the hall to hurt me. And he could have struck him dead at the door. He has the power to strike him dead at the door, but he is far more interested in the redemption of that soul and has so much love for that evil thinking, demonically driven, broken person. He has so much love for him that he will sit and watch us both be damaged in that time. And then he will love both of us to a
Yes.
place of getting forgiveness and forgiving someone else.
But I also believe, first of all, he does not put up on us any more than we can bear. Second of all, we would not be the people that we are had we not gone through the things that we've gone through.
And
We would
that's
not.
hard. That's hard to
I
admit, but it's
know, I
true.
know.
It's true.
We would not be able to help other people through
Mm-mm,
stuff because you cannot teach what you don't know and you
mm-mm.
can't give what you don't have. And we have what we have because of the experiences that we've had. And those experiences, experiences did not define who
Mm-mm.
we are, you
They just
know?
glorified God in our lives.
Yes,
Right? So his
absolutely.
strength is made perfect when we don't have
Yes.
any. And
No, we
that's that 2 Corinthians chapter 1, verses 3 through 5.
yes,
He gives me
yes,
comfort in my distress, so I can give comfort to someone in theirs.
yes.
And
Now
so
I have your other book up. Can you believe we've
mhm,
only got 3 minutes
I
left?
know. It does fly. It does fly when we talk, Vera. Remember the first time we met? I don't know
Yes,
how long
I
we were on the
know. Yes, we were on the phone for quite some time that
phone.
day.
We
A
were. So
a Christian's Victim Guide to Forgiving the Unforgivable.
right. So after I wrote the discarded Bible study, it was being picked up and used in some recovery groups. And because the studies are very similar. One's from the perspective of an abandoned daughter, and one is from the perspective of abuse. And in the first one, I touched very briefly on the abuse, and that God was able to give me the ability to forgive that person as well as my father. But when people began to use it in recovery group and that sort of thing, they would say to me, "How did you forgive that guy, the guy that did the abusing?" Because many of them in recovery are victims of abuse, and
Yes,
they're self-medicating their pain,
yes,
and they
yes,
have been for years.
yes.
And now they've come to a place where they're trying to stay clean and sober, but they can't let go of that hurt. It's really difficult to let go of that hurt and constantly see themselves as just
The
a victim.
victim.
Right.
Yes. Be the
So
victor, not the
we
victim.
exactly. Um and so I had to so when I rewrote the discarded study to be more about the forgiveness of an unforgivable trauma, that's how this study came out. But the concepts are very similar. When you feel unloved, unwanted, abused, and unseen by God, you have to battle that with truth. If you don't know the truth that you are really loved and wanted and worthy and all of that, if you don't battle that with the truth, you'll keep walking around as a victim, and you won't fulfill the promises that He has for you.
Yes.
You can't do it. So so that's how that second study was written. And you had asked me earlier where the drama queen thing came from, and I don't think I ever got there. In the midst of prayer time with someone, I was talking to them about what do we call this podcast that where I can share these concepts. And she had said, "Oh, you're such a drama queen. You're making this harder than it is." And I went, "Whoa,
That's it.
that's it. That is so it." Yeah, so that's it. And one of the and here's the thing. Um, I had a conversation not too long ago, and I know we've only got a minute or two, but I had a
Yeah.
conversation not too long ago with a woman who had lost her child. Horribly, it was horrific. He was attacked in big city,
Mhm.
and the criminals were never brought to justice. And she
Oh,
really has struggled with some hurt about that. And I had said to her, "Are you sure you've forgiven them?" And she had said, "Just because I haven't forgiven them doesn't mean I'm bitter." And I would say that it's not possible to truly forgive and still be bitter, and that it's okay to hash that out with the Lord and say, "I'm still mad." He already knows you're
yes.
mad. He already
Yes.
knows you're mad. It's okay to say to him, "I don't understand. I can't comprehend. This is very hard. This is painful. This is all these things." Do you know that if we don't suffer, we don't understand a Christ that suffers for us?
Yes.
And that is one of the reasons if we don't need a savior, we tend not to look for one. And so that is one of the things that I want people to understand. It's okay to be very authentic and broken before a heavenly Father that wants to scoop you up and
Yes.
make it better.
Yes. And with that, that is a great way to end the show. So, with that, thanks. I want you to say that one more time. And listening audience, have a wonderful Memorial Day weekend. Enjoy your family, enjoy your friends, and see me on Tuesday with another guest. And so I want you to say what you just said, and then I'm going to close us out. But I want you to hold on, don't leave.
I want people to know that it's okay to be broken and mad and angry before God and be very authentic with him because his desire is to scoop you up and make it better.
Yes. God bless. That's awesome. Thank
Amen.
you. And just hold on as we close out. Thank you. Okay.
The